At the depth of a small hollow, isolated by hills of dense forest, sits a peculiar 21st century attraction. For decades, its wealthy visitors have stayed beyond the wooden walls, etching their names in its guest book. For the many, it is a place which does not exist. Yet for the few, it promises to bring to life the wildest of dreams. A tagline which borders on the cliché, were it not for the fact that it offers exactly that. An isolated retreat where each room has a large picture window looking into an enclosure of majestic beasts. If being watched by several pairs of glowing eyes while you sleep is your cup of tea, then Ardois Leather Lodge might be the place for you. Don't be too hasty though. If you're an average Joe of this earth, then it is highly unlikely that you will ever get a peek. It is the elite's best kept secret, you see, only whispered to those recommended by their predecessors, a wealthy circle of Homo sapiens, all sharing the ultimate exclusive experience. The Dorchester Hotel, you say? A mere starter. Mandarin Oriental, a fancy dessert. Ardois Leather Lodge is a complete and utter feast. It is, by all means, a turn of true misfortune that the invitation came into my possession one Friday evening. If you ask any member of the rich and famous, I am a well-respected hotel critic. If you ask any of my closest friends or family, you won't get an answer. I was only considered good at my job because I was born critical. Sure, I may have made a living, but in reality, I am a lonely individual who has yet to form any meaningful relationships. Does it bother me? Of course it doesn't. Is this living? Of course it isn't. Yet by the time I realized this, it was too late. So now I mull over my younger years while slowly rotting away in retirement. Criticism is not an art form. It is the bane of seeing things through tinted spectacles. Unfortunately, those things include other human beings. The letter itself was oddly simplistic. It was posted through my front door around 10 o'clock that evening in an ebony envelope with gold lettering. No courtesy of a phone number, no address, just the following message. Dear Mr. Labatt, we are delighted to inform you that you are booked in for a weekend stay at Ardois Lodge Hotel and reserve upon recommendation from Chairman and Live member Mr. Slyne Bevick. Please make your way to Frickett Road, Narcliffe, B50 4PD on the 21st of November at 2:30 a.m, where our chauffeur will be waiting. We look forward to having you. The Ardois Lodge Hotel and Reserve Team. I caught a glance of my ghostly self-grimacing in the dining room mirror. The bags under my eyes, a painful reminder of my old age. It was for this very reason, in fact, that the letter made me uncomfortable. My retirement was a personal decision, not due to a lack of work. I had become a great admirer of Slyne Peter Bevick throughout my career, working with a variety of his hotels. The Hungarian prodigal son was a man of many trades, establishing his own chain at the ripe age of 23 and going on to build a small monopoly within the hospitality industry. I first came across his work back in London when I took on one of his Soho wine and dine experiences, which provided some of the finest steak I have ever had the pleasure of tasting. Though, what I liked most about Bevick was his distinction from the rest of the hotel tycoon crowd. Instead of using money to try and make me talk well of his business, he let his business do the talking. And could they talk? Whether it be his retreat within the depths of the Miombo woodlands, the private Gothic getaway of Tallinn, or the renovated war bunkers of Vienna, Bevick and his designers blew the brains of many, my own included. It came as a great shock that Bevick had died in his sleep that night. had received a call from a former agent the following morning about news of a severe stroke. For professional reasons, I would not attend his funeral, despite every fibre of my body urging me to go to the crematorium. The invitation to the lodge festered in the back of my mind like a bad memory, the idea growing stronger and stronger as the month of November loomed. The reason I shuffled out of a cab at 2:30 a.m. on the 21st was largely down to my sheer respect for the man. I decided to see it as an honor to carry out a review of his last hotel, his last piece of art. Who knew? Perhaps even his magnum opus. The winter air had a sharp bite as the headlights of my taxi lit up a figure in the bleak beyond. My ears were met with an eerie creaking sound which echoed from a barricaded gate in front of me, the entrance to an enclosure impossible to gauge the size of. My host, whose figure had slowly morphed into the shape of a large hooded man, proceeded to light up my frozen face with a flashlight before heading straight for the open field. There was a thick fog on the horizon, but I could make out more lights as we approached my next method of transport. The ominous shadows of floodlights began to take shape around us, and the picture painted itself. Walking into an empty airstrip, it dawned on me that my journey by land had come to an abrupt end. The blades of an old chopper started slicing the air above us, walking from its slumber like some mechanical beast out of hibernation. While being ushered into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the windshields. The same bearded ghost from a few weeks ago staring back, lanky in stature, with barely enough body fat to keep me warm, notably more bewildered than ever. Not a single word was ushered from the moment I left my Greenwich flat until departure. As I stepped away from the earth, for the first time in years, I felt completely powerless. The bulk of my journey took several hours, with the chopper rattling through the wind high above what I thought was the British countryside. However, I could have sworn to decipher some mountainous terrain, ocean, and plenty of dense forest. It was among the same dark greenery that I first caught sight of it. Tucked away neatly at the bottom of a large hill appeared a group of strange wooden complexes, each accompanied by open panes of overgrown exotic plantation. What would have appeared as somewhat idyllic if the weather were more pleasant seemed bleak in the winter sleet. Approaching a small landing pad, I was slowly overwhelmed by an unwelcome sensation of loneliness. Around us were no other vehicles, lights nor people. Some getaway indeed. 2 attempts to land later, and my need for blankets and a warm fire had now peaked. Engines cut, you could still hear the faint howling of the dying storm outside. I was somewhat at peace for a moment in time, mere seconds in fact, before the pilot unleashed chaos by opening the door. Stepping out down the concrete steps, I was handed over from one figure to another, like some shady trade where I was part of the deal. My new acquaintance was a young Asian lady who, after giving me a quick nod, called over to some men by the entrance of the wooden building. While handing my suitcase, they murmured some words to each other in what sounded like either Mandarin or Cantonese. Up close, the building was unremarkable. A large oak structure barely built into the hillside. There were no windows, just one solitary door. My short companion produced some sort of keycard from her pocket. One quick beep, a sharp click of the lock, and finally, there was silence. My first attempt at small talk fell on deaf ears as we crept down a narrow corridor. I assumed that this was out of respect for those still sleeping. It must have been around 5 in the morning after all. The long night had left my head extremely heavy, my brain pressing hard against the back of bloodshot eyes. Our route ahead bordered on sleepwalk, right up until I was awoken at the face of a burgundy door. The woman turned towards me and produced a small diary, tattered at the rim, but still held together. I was able to examine her face properly, her muscles completely idle and fixated on the task at hand. At first glance, she looked young, but there was a remarkable tightness to her skin, which was sewn by neat scars from what looked like plastic surgery. The uncomfortable silence brought the scratching sound of my pen against the guest book to life. The woman nodded once more, handed me another keycard, and walked off out of sight. Finally, I was left to my own senses. I stepped forward into the first room of my stay. Panthera Leo. I've just checked the time. My watch shows 3:10 in the morning. It is from this point onwards that I may begin my review of the lodge. I must warn you that the following retelling of events will not be what you expect. It is also of most importance to note that it won't be submitted out of respect to Stein Bevic, nor anyone associated with the establishment. In fact, my final critique will most probably not come across as much of a critique at all. I write this because I feel that I have to, in order to comprehend the goings-on here. I write this not for the public eye, but for my own, and the little pieces of sanity that I have left. Ardor Lodge, a review. 23rd of November, 2044. A sea of maroon red overflows from the corridor into the dimly lit room before me. Shadows dance across the walls, different shapes morphing into one another. The roaring fire makes one feel instantly welcome. Panthera Leo's modern Manhattan loft-style rooms are once again tinged with Bevic's paintbrush, with a mixture of Victorian-style furniture and extravagant decorations. A grand chandelier complements the fireplace in the centerpiece, which also offers various forms of entertainment, such as a large screen and surround sound stereo system. To the corner is a small kitchen place, animated with racks of expensive booze and a fridge stocked with an assortment of various meats. A glorious king-size bed takes up most of the space in the other room, with a sparkling clean ensuite bathroom and electrical shower complementing it nicely. Panthera Leo lives up to its name in that it offers a room oozing with style, attraction, and self-confidence. If an animal as majestic and powerful as the lion was a human being, this is the type of habitat it would occupy. The only disappointing element was the lack of actual lions. As a beautiful sunset lit up the sky, a pinkish hue and the light began to fade. So did my hopes of seeing my feline friends. Staring into the abyss of a dark cave in the distance, I realized that it had been nearly 10 years since I had seen one of its majestic inhabitants in the flesh. All I had spotted during the day were a few carcasses dotted around the park amongst the tall trees. Despite this, for anyone wishing to see their first lion since the feline extinction of 2038, I would not let my misfortune deter you. There sure is life beyond that grass. You can feel it. I wish I could say that the clear skies remained for my second night. After spending the good part of the Saturday sipping whiskey and listening to Coltrane, I decided to tick this room off my list and head down to meet the apes. I found the second retreat, Pandroglodytes, to be a lot smaller than Panthera leo. Yet my fortunes appeared to have changed because once the heavens opened up over the park, I could just about make out the burly figures of my neighbours. As a personal side note, I must mention that the sight of their shifting shadows was not a welcome one. I had always felt uneasy by the intelligence and strength of primates. It was not their ability to tear a man from limb to limb which frightened me, more so their resemblance to man itself. Anything that looks like a human that isn't terrifies me. My thoughts soon drifted though, delighted to see that this room also came prepared with some beautiful meats and plenty more alcohol. The second lodge is decorated in a peculiar beige colour, which covers the majority of the walls. Much like Panthera leo, it contains tributes to the Victorian, with a grand dining table located in the centre of the room. It blows my mind as to how they moved any of this furniture out to the middle of nowhere. Yet, if there was someone who knew the right people, it was Bevic. Every room type at the lodge is distinguished by a different coloured door. My knights were the lions, represented by a valiant red, and the apes a dark oak. There is another experience which includes spending an evening surrounded by alligators, yet with a population of reptiles still in abundance, the authenticity of this one failed to grip me. Needless to say, my evenings behind red and oak were quite the experience. The food was exquisite, the living conditions just right, and the silence unbeatable. To top it all off, I didn't have to speak to a single soul for the entire 2 nights. Ardor Lodge is a highly recommended establishment, the greatest getaway, one which I would highly recommend if you're looking for the perfect escape. Signed, Parlin Labat. And so forth marks the end of my review of Ardor Leather Lodge. The time of completion was around 2:30 this morning. Since then, I have been staring at the ink-stained sheet of paper before me. It has been 5 hours since I added my name to the end of the paper. Seeing as we have come this far, I think I now owe it to you to write to you separately, away from this sheet of lies. I wish I could add more to it. I wish I could offer more of an explanation as to why Slyne Bevic's latest creation emphasizes his genius, how his extravagant modern Victoria orgy has culminated into an explosion of avant-garde taste and colour, how the place is brimming with the bizarre and peculiar, and how the idea alone is a winner. Who'd have thought that we would be able to not only see, but live alongside animals since the fall of their kingdom? It was something I've barely considered because my thoughts have deepened with the dark. I've realised that this is not a 5-star hotel. God, this is not a hotel at all. I must tell you the truth before it is too late. All because I decided to take a look beyond the glass. Every hotel is a facade, you see. Every review I have written is rampant with pretense. A hotel is an establishment providing accommodation, meals, and other services for travellers and tourists. As long as it does what it says in the tin and looks good, then you're on to a winner. Yet with everything, the deeper you dig, the more earth you uncover and the more you find, the further you stray from the definition of a hotel. It all started with a 3 a.m. shudder. Waking up a suffocated mess, I scrambled to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. I hadn't suffered from sleep paralysis in quite some time. I often found that it tended to happen whenever I slept in a new place, in a room I wasn't familiar with. Washing the sweat off of my face, I soon realized that my room was lit solely by the bluish moonlight from the picture window. A flick of the light switch, and my fears were confirmed. A blackout. As I paced slowly around the kitchen counter, my alerted mind soon grew bored of its surroundings. It was during this time that I convinced myself to do some of that digging. Plunging headfirst into the dark corridor, I questioned my decision immediately. The weak light from my phone created the illusion of a narrowing hallway up ahead. I stumbled forward, following the walls with my hands in the hope of reaching the reception hall. Slowly feeling the rough ridges of the wallpaper, my heartbeats made the wall feel like they were pulsating. With no reception in sight, I decided to knock on a white door ahead of me, where a flicker of light danced slowly at the ridge. A nervous knock, followed by another, resulted in no answer. If I was alone in this establishment, I sure felt it. The room itself was full of bizarre decorations, even stranger than in my previous stays. On the desk lay a series of illegible blueprints illuminated by several candles. While examining one of the old torches, I noticed that the wax had been dripping for some time. I stood quietly as a droplet of white wax fell onto the floor, dripping into a large puddle of water at my feet. I would have assumed it was a staff room, were it not for the large bed and picture window to my right, identical to the lodges I had been staying in. I was almost immediately overwhelmed by the strong smell of rotting meat, which brought tears to my bloodshot eyes as they lingered on the bevic painting above the window. 4 lifelike faces lined the canvas, each looking more alive than the last. I found Bevic's art to be uncomfortable in daylight, so illuminating it with a weak phone torch did no favors for my increasing heart rate. These ghoulish masks looked pained, their expressions portraying tormented souls, seemingly tortured for centuries. I continued shining my light around the room, searching the beige wallpaper for some sort of light switch. The room was dead silent, right up until I felt it. A stiffening at the neck, a burning sensation which moves slowly into your stomach and clenches tightly in a chokehold of anxiety. The sixth senses which start back up into your brain like warning signals, warning you that you might no longer be alone, warning you that someone is watching you. I pointed my flashlight straight at the window. Trees, another empty encampment. But for whom? For what? Lions? Surely not. I scanned the borders slowly, the light trembling with my hand. Too small, I thought. Apes? I looked for trees, but this part of the lodge was void of any kind of greenery. A real sandpit. Guiding the light slowly across the park, that's where I saw it. A moving shadow. With the dying light of my phone, I felt my heart explode into demented palpitations. Turning briskly, I grabbed a candle as a source of light, a source of comfort. Slowly approaching the large window, I got as close as I could until I finally saw the horror beyond my own reflection. Men. Human men huddled in a group, facing downwards, shaking, not in a cold shiver, but a mad tremble, one which resonates through you when you're in a rage or terrified. My sweaty palms pressed hard against the glass. I could feel myself quiver in the same way. What looked like a group of 5 or 6 human beings stood together in the dark, outside, at 3 o'clock in the morning. The longer I looked, the worse it got. I realized that something was glistening, yet It was not the glistening of sweat, more the glistening of blood. These beings could not be human, for they were living, not without clothes, but without skin, their bare flesh glistening against my light. I ran down the corridor, stumbling for the exit, screaming and crying in terror. The colour of flesh flashed through my mind like a sickness. The coloured doors and beige walls, the lifelike paintings, the abundance of raw meat. Collapsing to my floor, I slammed the door in my wake. I have since been cowering in the corner with my pen and open book. What started off as a mere review has become a diary of my erratic thoughts. If you find this, please rescue me. If it's too late, then I beg you to rescue the others by telling the world about what happened tonight. All I can hope for now is some sort of salvation from this lodge, this damn leather lodge. The time is 3:45 in the morning, and something is glistening in the moonlight right outside my window.